Thanks very much, Eva. It's great to be here with you this morning, and I want to just start by talking briefly about who I am, because I think that who I am informs how I see this issue, and because I'm the Minister of Transportation, that matters, because then I ask questions and I have opinions, and then we make decisions. So two things about who I am. And I was just talking about this with some of the folks from York Region. I grew up in Richmond Hill, right in downtown Richmond Hill, which at that time was about 16,000 people, surrounded by fields. And so it was a small town, and outside of the house that I first grew up in, there were undeveloped lots. And so we spent a lot of time walking and running and playing outside. In fact, the rites of passage, as we grew up in a small town like that, had to do with walking to the library or walking to school by yourself. That was what it meant to grow up in a place. I think my mother followed me the first time I walked to the library, but you know, you started to learn to separate from your family by walking. And I will come back to that because there are many, many children growing up in our society who don't have that experience, and I think that's something that we need to think about. The second thing that you need to know about me is that I spent 3 years as a young mother in the Netherlands, living in Holland in a little town outside of The Hague. So I was rarely in my car. I rode a bike when I was pregnant with my first child, when I had my first child, when I was pregnant with my second child, with my first child on the back of the bike, and all of that safely on the streets of Voorburg and The Hague and riding to Leiden and Delft. And so I kind of developed this sense of what a safe street was from those experiences. And so I bring that to this work now as the Minister of Education. And I think that the final thing I want to say by way of introduction is that we are having to be very intentional about creating safe streets, and in a way, we're having to roll back time, so it's a back to the future kind of moment, because we haven't been intentional, I think, in this part of the world. We haven't been intentional because we've made assumptions about what we're going to have infinitely, you know, that we've got infinite space, that it's not a problem, that it's all just going to unfold on its own, and that's not true. That's not what happens. We have to be more intentional than that. So this conversation today is about how to be intentional together, how to have different levels of government working together, how to have people outside of government working with government, and I would suggest pushing government. I think at this moment in our history, there's pressure that needs to come from people outside of government on all levels of government to be more intentional. I think the public is ahead of government in some ways on many of these issues. So none of that is in my notes. So I will try to truncate my formal remarks. But I do believe that my work as Minister of Transportation is integral to the partnerships that you're forming here. Having those partnerships between ministry staff, public and private ventures is critical. And I think that that's what allows us to do good planning, is if we have that kind of partnership structure in place, and that there's an ongoing discussion about what the right solutions are. And I'm sure you will be talking today about where the forums for discussion should be, who should be facilitating those, what are the civic structures that should be in place, and how should government interact with you. On the big picture in Ontario, the Ontario Planning Act calls for building communities that support walking as a matter of provincial interest. And I know that many of you are aware of the Jane's Walk. I don't know if Jane Farrow is here today, but her walkability measures are really interesting to look at as you look at what makes a walking area safe, what makes it welcoming to people, and how does that interact with making a safe community. The growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe calls for communities that support cycling and walking. And sure that this issue is on the table. We know that the more livable our communities are, the more they're going to attract investment, the more they are going to be viable economically, and the more inhabitable they're going to be for the people who want to live there. So what have we done? In the last 2 years, our ministry has awarded more than $750,000 to 33 municipalities for projects that promote alternatives to driving. So that means the kinds of cycling infrastructure that are necessary in municipalities. We're starting to update our current bicycle policy, which was first launched in 1992. It hasn't been revised since then, but we think there needs to be a new cycling policy in the province. You know, the gas prices are going up, and we know that transportation and vehicle emissions are about 29% of our emission problem in the province, and so we know that we need to promote cycling. My vision is that we will have a map of Ontario that will show how all the cycling paths link up. So where the municipal paths meet provincial paths. We're paving shoulders on some of our highways as we do reconstruction work. There's a pilot project on Highway 6 up in Marnport Memorial area where we're paving an extra meter on the side of the highway after we paved roads. Yeah, there you go. And we're looking at other opportunities around the province where we can create a road that's safer for both vehicles and cyclists, because that's what it's about. It's about sharing the road with everyone. And part of that is awareness building too, because you can pave the shoulder and then you have to put up a sign that tells everyone to share the road, and